I'm Sally Shuttleworth. I'm Professor of English Literature at the University of Oxford and St Anne's College, and I'm PI on the Constructing Scientific Communities project.
Hi, I'm Gavin Dawson. I'm Professor of Victorian Literature and Culture at the University of Leicester, and I'm a co-investigator on the Constructing Scientific Communities project.
I'm Chris Lintott. I'm a distracted astronomer who runs the Zooniverse here at the University of Oxford.
The Constructing Scientific Communities project, which has a subtitle Citizen Science in the 19th and 21st Centuries, is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. It's one of their large science and culture projects. It's based at the University of Oxford and University of Leicester, but with wonderful London partners, the Natural History Museum, the Royal College of Surgeons and their Hunterian Museum, and also the Royal Society.
One of the original ideas for the project was to do something with 19th century science periodicals, which we felt were incredibly important for both the creation and the dissemination of scientific knowledge in that period, but really hadn't been looked at all that much by historians. Over the years, though, the project became much bigger and grander and in many ways more interesting. And one of the key things was an insight that Sally had, which was that there was a clear parallel between what science periodicals allowed in the 19th century, which was a real kind of mass participation in science, and something that was happening before our eyes in the early 21st century with the emergence of the internet and new digital technologies. And that was kind of the citizen science movement, something similar to what had happened in the 19th century. Again, that sense of a mass participation of ordinary people, not just finding out about science or being educated in science, but genuinely participating in the creation of science.
The inspiration for the project came from my pondering about the development of citizen science, and particularly the Zooniverse platform, which is led by my colleague Chris Lintott in astrophysics in Oxford, and realising that what it was doing was bringing in thousands of people across the world to participate in science in ways that we have not seen, I realised, since the 19th century.
So Zooniverse has led us to work with all sorts of people in an effort to try and understand what's happening in these projects. But in the ConSciCom project, what's been really exciting is that we've had time to be truly interdisciplinary. Instead of you writing your article and me writing mine, we've had conversations and space to create our own community and work together to understand what the different disciplines involved in the project are thinking. It's been a wonderfully fun intellectual experience that comes out of committing to thinking in ways that belong to other disciplines.
Citizen science today is based on a form of crowdsourcing where people, wherever they are across the world, can actually contribute to science. Whereas in the 19th century, people were normally engaged in their local natural history club or meteorological club, etc. But they communicated primarily through their periodicals, sending out their texts, which they hoped would reach a wider audience.
One of the really terrific things about working on the project for me has been it's expanded my understanding of public participation in science. People often talk a lot about popular science, but it tends to be a sense of kind of elite science being trickled down to ordinary people. One of the things that the project has done has to really made me see how the contributions of ordinary people have played a fantastic part in making and shaping elite science.
So involving citizens in scientific discovery isn't just a good idea, it's actually a necessity. We do science that we couldn't do unless we had millions of people involved in sorting through and being surprised by data. But it's also effective communication. By engaging with projects like those on the Zooniverse, we break down the barriers that prevent people thinking of themselves as scientists and researchers. So rather than getting the idea that science is something done in an ivory tower or a sparkling secret laboratory somewhere, people who take part in Zooniverse projects think of science as something they do as part of their lives, and that changes, I hope, how they perceive the world and how they read stories about climate or medical risk. So this is good science communication, and it also produces science, and where the line between those two things is, I don't know.
Having so many institutions involved has really been quite wonderful. Somewhat draining in time, I have to say, but really exciting, because I've always worked on science, but not necessarily with scientists. And it has been fantastic to be involved in projects such as Orchid Observers, for example, where we've worked with the national orchid community to devise the field study. Then how the study worked was that we asked members of the general public to go out and take photographs of orchids that they found flowering. These would then be put up online for anybody to identify, and interestingly, people identified with a very high degree of accuracy whether they were specialists in orchids or knew nothing at all. And these are then going to be compared to data drawn from the citizen scientists who've been transcribing herbarium sheets from the 19th century. So we've got records of flowering times from then, which can be collated with our current data to produce very important details on the potentiality of understanding climate change, as you see the shifts in flowering time. So to be involved with that sort of thing, which is so outside of my usual mode of life, it's quite interesting for a scholar of originally English literature.
Well, working on such a large collaborative project, it certainly had challenges. Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to keep lots of different plates spinning all at the same time, but it also has kind of wonderful benefits as well, learning from so many different people doing different things. So particularly working not just with historians and literary critics, but actual scientists as well, with digital technicians as well. My horizons of what I know have been really kind of expanded. It's also a lot of fun.
Some of the unexpected things that have come out have been really quite delightful. Working on meteorology, for example, which sounds a bit tedious, but discovering that there was an independent network of people who refused to be taken over by the government and were run by someone called G.J. Simmons, who started off with about 40 people in, I think, around 1860. And by 1900, when he died, he'd got about 6,000 people across the British Isles who were daily, wind, rain, snow, whatever, going out to take their meteorological readings and sending them to him. And he'd sit in London putting together millions of calculations in order to produce his reports. Very, very strong sense, because he produced 2 periodicals, and you find in them really strong sense of community, people utterly committed to this, not merely because they think it's important to understand about rain at their time, but because they knew it was going to be important for us. And these records now feed in to climate science in very significant ways. So people in the Victorian times were actually thinking that what they did on a daily basis is going to be important for us.
So the 19th century has started cropping up in my talk, so it's wonderful to be giving an astrophysics seminar and be able to pull back and make an argument based on what meteorological observers were doing 150 years ago. I think that sort of thing helps people notice what's going on around them, and that reflection of contemporary and past cultures is hugely exciting and interesting. Hasn't led to the discovery of more galaxies, but it has helped us build projects that maximise the chance of interesting research happening.
We aim to actively involve ordinary people as much as we can in our activities, whether it be in our citizen science projects themselves or in seminars we run, lectures that are open to the public. Many of our events are explicitly designed so that we can get feedback from the public and work with them to think about ways in which we can further extend our engagement. We have active Twitter accounts and blogs, which are very much designed to get people thinking and involved with our activities. And of course, we do videos like this.
I hope that one of the long-term contributions that the project will make is to changing the way in which we do history and using both large digital databases, which is something that scholars are already starting to do, but to use public contributions to actually kind of help us to manage those large databases much better. So this is something we've been doing with Science Gossip, which has been looking at illustrations, which I think are things that are often lost in large-scale digitization projects, where you can do kind of free word searching using OCR programs, but actually the pictures get completely lost because you can't find them in searches. And we've been using kind of volunteer contributions through Science Gossip to help classify those pictures. And I think one of the things is that it may well make kind of visual material a more important component of digitization projects.
Well, one of the great joys of Zooniverse has been that we've been able to play with all sorts of people who build projects on our platform and people who help us try and understand it. But with ConSciCom, we've had the space to go deeper than that and to think seriously about what we're doing and to use the work of our colleagues from history and from literature and beyond to understand what we're doing. And I'd recommend that to anyone. I think all scientists, all researchers should have the kind of support we've had to be able to think interdisciplinary and to take that idea seriously.